The moment I tell you that a real soldier from 1776 appeared in my backyard, you might think I'm exaggerating, but every detail you're about to hear is exactly how it unfolded. I still remember the cold pressure in my chest when I first saw him standing there, confused and breathing heavily, like he had just run through a battlefield. What happened next changed everything I understood about time, history, and even my own family. By the end of this story, you'll know the truth that has kept me awake at night ever since. I was washing dishes when I heard a loud thud outside, the kind that makes you freeze for a second because it doesn't fit with the normal sounds of a quiet afternoon. At first, I thought maybe a tree branch had fallen, but the sound had weight, like someone had collapsed. When I stepped onto my patio, I saw a man lying on the grass wearing clothes that didn't belong in this century. His coat was torn, his boots were muddy, and the flag patch sewn onto his sleeve looked hand-stitched, with the colors slightly faded. He sat up quickly when he heard my footsteps, and the way he looked at me made my skin prickle. It was like he had never seen a house before. His eyes were sharp and alert, as if he expected an attack at any moment. When he tried to stand, he winced and grabbed his side where a dark red stain spread across his shirt. I took a step closer, and he raised both hands cautiously, whispering, "Please, tell me if the British followed me." I stared at him, unsure if he was injured, acting, or delusional, but nothing about his expression looked fake. He scanned the yard with a soldier's awareness, checking the fences and windows like he expected muskets pointed at him. When I knelt beside him, he seemed surprised that I wasn't an enemy or a threat. Then he asked a question that made my stomach flip. "What colony is this?" I told him he was in the United States, and I watched confusion twist across his face as he repeated the words under his breath like they were foreign. He whispered, "United States?" As if the phrase itself was a prophecy. Suddenly, he looked down at his uniform and muttered something about failing his assignment. Every answer I gave him seemed to create more panic rather than ease it. He told me his name was Nathaniel Briggs, a Continental soldier who had been carrying dispatch letters from Philadelphia when he was separated from his regiment. He said he was ambushed near a riverbank and slipped into the trees while bullets cracked behind him. The last thing he remembered was falling, hitting the ground hard, and then waking up in my backyard. The way he described the ambush felt too vivid to be rehearsed. When I brought him inside and gave him water, he held the cup like it was made of silver, turning it in his hands with fascination. He tapped the glass and asked how something so clear could be shaped so perfectly. The kitchen lights stunned him, and when they flickered for a second, he jumped in alarm. That's when I realized he truly believed he was from 1776. I tried to calm him by speaking slowly, but he reacted with childlike wonder to every modern object in the room. When my phone buzzed, he almost drew a knife from his belt until I assured him it was harmless. He asked if the glowing screen was some kind of military signal device, and I struggled not to laugh because he looked dead serious. After a few moments, he apologized, explaining that a soldier who survives only by instinct never trusts first. While he rested on my couch, I researched the name Nathaniel Briggs on my laptop, but the results only made things stranger. There was a single mention of a private by that name listed as missing in action. During the fall of 1776, the record stated he vanished without a trace after carrying confidential documents across enemy lines. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the faded digital archive, realizing his story matched exactly. When I told him what I found, he clutched his head like he was trying to force memories back into place. He whispered that he remembered the dispatch letters, but not what happened to them after the ambush. The mention of being listed as missing unsettled him deeply, as if it meant something more than just being lost. He asked if the future saw him as a coward who abandoned his post. I told him he wasn't a coward, but a man who somehow crossed centuries without understanding how or why. He shook his head and said time doesn't bend for ordinary men, only for those chosen by something greater. I wasn't sure if he meant fate or fear talking, but he looked at me like he believed what he said. His eyes were filled with a mix of guilt and determination. As hours passed, he insisted on returning to 1776, not for glory, but because he said he carried something important. He believed the dispatch letters he'd been carrying held intelligence that could shift the outcome of an entire campaign. Without delivering them, he feared he had altered history just by being here. I felt a heavy knot form in my chest hearing the weight he carried on his shoulders. I explained that going back might not be possible, but he argued that if time brought him forward, maybe time could take him back. He asked me to show him anything that could explain this impossible shift, something that could help him understand the gap between his world and mine. The desperation in his voice made me search deeper, even if part of me feared the answers. I had no idea where to begin, but I knew doing nothing would break him. I took him outside again, hoping the quiet evening might calm him or spark new memories. He walked around my yard carefully, touching objects like they were sacred artifacts from another planet. When he stepped near the spot where he first appeared, he stopped abruptly and knelt. His fingers brushed over the ground like he felt something I couldn't see. He said the air felt split, as if the world had torn open for just a moment. He claimed there was a pressure, a vibrating pull, like the earth itself had inhaled. I didn't feel anything, but the seriousness in his voice gave me chills. Then he looked up at me and said he wasn't alone when he crossed. I froze and asked what he meant, and he said he remembered a shadow behind him just before the fall. He explained that during the ambush, there was a man following him, a traitor rumored to leak information to the British. He said the man had chased him into the woods claiming to surrender, but Nathaniel never believed him. He now feared that man was pulled through time as well. My heart raced at the thought of another person from 1776 wandering somewhere in the present. Nathaniel stood up quickly, gripping my arm, saying the traitor carried information far more dangerous than his dispatch letters. If that man learned anything about the modern world, the consequences could be catastrophic. I suddenly felt like my backyard had become the center of two centuries colliding. We searched the area around my house, though I wasn't sure what I expected to find. Nathaniel moved with a soldier's precision, scanning corners and tracking paths like he was hunting prey. His expression hardened, and he whispered that something wasn't right in the silence. Then, behind the tool shed, he found footprints that weren't mine or his. The prints were shallow but fresh, leading away from my fence toward the woods behind the neighborhood. Nathaniel knelt beside them and examined the spacing, saying whoever left them was injured but moving fast. He said the traitor must have realized he wasn't in his own time and fled to avoid being caught again. I felt a cold sweat form on my neck as he followed the trail with tense determination. We walked deeper into the woods, and the air grew heavier, the way it does before a storm. Nathaniel stopped every few minutes to listen, his muscles tensed like coiled wire. When I asked if he was sure we should be doing this, he said history depended on it. His voice carried a mixture of fear and responsibility that made me keep moving forward. We eventually reached a clearing where broken branches formed a chaotic pattern on the ground. Nathaniel pointed out signs of someone stumbling, someone trying to regain balance. He followed the pattern until we reached a dead end where the earth looked disturbed, like something had collided with the ground. He crouched and whispered that another time rupture had opened here. Before I could process his words, a faint echo hummed through the clearing, a low vibration that made the ground tremble beneath us. Nathaniel grabbed my arm and pulled me back, saying the rupture was unstable. The hum grew louder, and a swirl of light began forming in the air like mist caught in a whirlpool. I watched with growing fear as the air twisted into a shimmering split. A figure stumbled out of the distortion and collapsed onto the ground, coughing violently. Nathaniel rushed forward and rolled the man over, revealing a uniform similar to his but marked with a red insignia. The man gasped when he saw Nathaniel and whispered, "You shouldn't have followed me." Nathaniel's jaw clenched as he recognized the traitor. The man tried to reach for something inside his coat, but Nathaniel restrained him with surprising strength. The traitor shouted that everything Nathaniel fought for would be destroyed because he failed to deliver the letters. Nathaniel demanded to know where the dispatches were, but the man only smirked. Then he whispered something so quiet I almost missed it. "I left them where time can't find them." Before Nathaniel could react, the rupture pulsed again and pulled the traitor backward, dragging him toward the twisting light. Nathaniel tried to grab him, but the ground shook violently and forced him to let go. The traitor screamed something I couldn't understand as he vanished into the distortion. The light folded in on itself and disappeared, leaving only silence behind. Nathaniel sank to his knees, staring at the empty space where the rupture had been. He whispered that the traitor had hidden the dispatches somewhere beyond their time, meaning the information might already be influencing history without anyone knowing. I felt a deep, twisting feeling in my stomach as I realized we had witnessed something that defied every rule of the world. Nathaniel looked at me with haunted eyes and said nothing was over yet. Before I could speak, the air in front of us flickered again, but this time only for a brief second. Nathaniel said it was a sign that the rupture might open again, either to pull him back or bring something else through. He didn't know which, and that terrified him more than the ambush. Then he stood up and said he needed to prepare for both. We walked back to my house in silence, and every step felt heavy with uncertainty. Nathaniel kept glancing at the sky as if expecting it to split open without warning. When we reached the yard, he turned to me and said he might not have much time left in this century. He thanked me for helping him, but his face carried the weight of someone who knew his fate wasn't his to choose. In the final moments before he stepped toward the spot where he first appeared, he paused and looked at me with a mixture of fear and acceptance. He said if the rupture returned, he would go back willingly, even if it meant facing the war again. He explained that unfinished duty is heavier than death itself. Then the ground beneath him vibrated softly, and he whispered, "It's starting." I watched in frozen disbelief as the air shimmered and wrapped around him like invisible hands pulling at his coat. Nathaniel turned toward me one last time and said, "If the traitor returns here instead of me, run." His body flickered like a reflection on disturbed water, and the shimmering light swallowed him whole. The yard fell silent again, leaving me staring at empty space. Now I checked that patch of grass every night, waiting for any sign that he came back or that something else followed him through. The truth he left behind still lives in my mind like a whisper I can't escape. Somewhere out there, the traitor's hidden messages might be altering history piece by piece. And every day, I wonder if the next rupture will bring Nathaniel back, or open for someone far worse. If you want more stories where time tears open and the past walks straight into the present, make sure to subscribe to Time Traveling Stories and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next chapter.